Welcome back to this video about the Archangel Uriel. Who was Uriel? Who might she have been recently, and who might he be now? Hello, my name's Hugh Evans, and today we're going to look at Uriel. We're going to look at the name of Uriel, what Uriel is associated with, and how that might be affecting our world today. So there's a picture of Uriel. This is from the Eastern Orthodox Christian tradition, and Uriel's holding a flame or a blaze, and you can just see some words coming out of Uriel's mouth, and Uriel's also carrying a sword. Now Uriel is not mentioned by name in the Bible, but is referred to twice. In chapter 3 verse 24 of Genesis, Uriel is referred to by the symbol associated with Uriel, or one of the symbols, which is a flaming sword. In Genesis chapter 5 verse 22, we are told that Enoch does not die, but goes and walks with God, where he begats more sons and daughters, Enoch being the grandfather of Noah and father of Methuselah. In the book of Enoch, one of the Gnostic scriptures, we are told by Enoch that he goes to meet Uriel. So there is some crossover there in what might have happened. Uriel is also mentioned by other Gnostic scriptures that may be references for the Bible, but that are not reflected fully, including the secret book of John, the book of Ezra, and others. Looking at the book of Enoch itself, book 3, chapter 72, we are told by Enoch that Uriel instructs him regarding the courses of the luminaries of heaven. And these are the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets, the relations of each according to their classes, their dominion, which is the parts of the sky they occupy, their seasons, which is their changing positions over the course of the year, and according to their names, and interestingly their places of origin, and according to their months, which refers to the Zodiac. Enoch also tells us that Uriel tells him the exact laws of these luminaries of heaven, as to regard all the years of the world and until eternity. So this can only be a method of explaining their historic movements in the heavens, but also predicting the movements of the stars and the planets and the sun and the moon into the future. In the ancient British tradition, Enoch is known as Idris, the great astronomer who charted the heavens from atop his sacred mountain, Cadair Idris, in North Wales. So perhaps we can use the ancient language from North Wales that is perhaps a language that's existed from before Noah to the time when Enoch went to receive instruction from Uriel, to actually understand what Uriel means. Well, Uriel is made of three smaller words, Ri, El. The chief being spirit or intelligence. Uriel is the chief, the boss, and not surprising if he had all the information to chart the heavens. After all, Enoch was only receiving instruction. Perhaps Enoch became Uriel after he had received instruction and Uriel had passed away. So here again we see Uriel with the blaze or the flame, the sword, and here is a flaming sword wielding Uriel with the solar disk behind his head and a luminary in his hand. perhaps emblematic of all the luminaries of the heavens, or the sun or the moon. Another couple of pictures of Uriel holding the solar disk or the luminary. And in more modern Christian tradition, Uriel is now made a saint. No longer is Uriel just associated with a symbol, but is now part of the mainstream, I suppose, and is carrying a book. Perhaps that's a little bit more mainstream than a sword or an orb. So let's look at these symbols. Why does Uriel carry a sword or a book or an orb? Well, most people in ancient times were not able to read or write, but they could understand a picture, what the picture meant in a context, and that is called a pictogram. And you can see here, that's the same way that Egyptian hieroglyphs are used. And then with Egyptian hieroglyphs, they can create whole sentences or whole explanations. And a homophone is something that means something else but sounds similar. So here, for example, is a picture of an eye. If I wanted to communicate an abstract concept like I or me, how would I do that? I can't draw that, but I can draw a human eye, and then the people who see that, they can understand that that means I or me. So using these techniques and understanding what that actually information is being communicated to us, what does that information mean? So Uriel is associated with a book, a flame or a blaze, a sword, a rod, and perhaps an orb. So let's look at a book first. A book in the ancient language of Enoch is a livre, and that implies two words, chle and fur, and this means a flow or host of fire. Incidentally, a livre is actually made of two words, chle and fraith, and that means a flow of utterances, which is what a book is. Since in ancient times the language was a verbal language primarily, and that books came later, and that perhaps refers to the utterance we saw Uriel in that first image. In Latin, the word for book is libor, and in French it's livre. Both these words have no other intrinsic meanings, unlike the ancient British word, which has intrinsic meaning. So let's come back to Uriel and his book, his flame or his blaze. Well, a fagel is a blaze, and that implies two words, fa and glu. And that means what envelops the ruler pure and fair. Fan means supreme, and another word for blaze is deith. Dai is God, and we get deity from that. In fact, the blaze is probably reversed out of deity or die. So together this represents the sun god, perhaps one of the earliest gods that ancient people revered before the Greek and the Latin and the Christian pantheon of religious beliefs. Uriel also had a sword, which is a cleth, and a chlath is a rod, so perhaps the sword implies a rod, and we've seen images of Uriel with a rod and an orb, and the orb is a cron or a croon, which may imply a crown. A rod is also a word used to reflect the ecliptic, where the planets and the luminaries move through the course of the year. And Uriel used the rod and the circle or the orb to chart the heavens, to understand the movement of the planets, the sun, the moon. And this was the information that Uriel gave to Enoch, and in this way communicated that Uriel was in control of the world. And here we have an image from Mesopotamia in the about 3000 before current era, the Namu stela, and we can see we have the crown, we have the rod and the ring, and there's also a rope there. In fact, this ruler has got two rods to measure the celestial heavens and the ring, and that's perhaps where we get the word ruler associated with a measuring device, and is sat on the throne. And in this cylinder seal we can see the rod and the ring depicted here together as a single emblem or symbol. Here we have an image from ancient Egypt, about 2500 BCE, and the combination of the ring and the rod was called the Shen ring. And there are a number of things on this image here showing the depiction of the Shen ring. Initially, the pharaohs of Egypt had their name shown as a Serek. This is a Serek here. And it's also called their Horus name because Horus, the hawk, sat normally on top, not every instance, but above the Serek name is the flying hawk carrying the Shen ring. And I've done a YouTube video on the Eye of Horus to explain what those components mean. The name of the pharaoh is inside this temple facade, and there's Horus. This image here shows the Shen ring on this scepter or wand. And by the 4th dynasty, pharaohs had the habit of putting their name inside this very large stretched out Shen ring, and we call that a cartouche today, because when French soldiers visited Egypt in the 1800s, they thought this shape looked like one of their rifle cartridges, which was called a cartouche, but actually it's a large Shen ring. So that's the rod and the ring, and the importance to these rulers of this symbol, these tools that Uriel employed to understand and measure the universe. Here we have the stela of Hammurabi, a Mesopotamian leader who invaded the area, set up an empire, and then established his laws in the Code of Hammurabi, and he wrote them down on a large piece of stone called a stela. And it's one of the earliest legal codes that we have in history written down. And here he is showing his authority to dictate these laws to his new subjects, his new empire. He's wearing the crown. He's holding the rod and the ring of authority that measures and determines the universe and the passage of time, the movement of the sun and the moon, and he's sat on his throne. So where might we see this imagery today? Well, here is the late Queen Elizabeth II, sat on her coronation throne. She's wearing the coronation crown of her authority, and she is holding the scepter and the orb that measure and determine the passage of time and the scale of the universe. And even the late Queen's name can be looked at in more detail. She has the same name as my mother, El Chli Sa Beth. We've seen already that El is part of Uriel and means spirit, being, or intelligence. Chli from Livra is a flow or a flood or a flux. when associated with Sa, which implies a star. This is starlight. Lisa or Sally is starlight, and Beth is a part of or descended from. So Elizabeth means a part of starlight, a spiritual flow, which I think is very nice. So the next YouTube video I will be looking at these individual components of the coronation regalia and trying to understand what each of these bits mean. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. Ring the bell so you don't miss out on the coronation special, and give it a thumbs up so that we can share this to other people so they might have a better understanding of these symbols we see in today's world that relate back to great antiquity. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.